I think Planted is a fantastic event because we have got to change the way that we live, both in towns and cities and in the countryside, and we absolutely need to bring nature into the spaces where we live. We cannot have this separation which we've had in the past. COVID has absolutely shown us how important it is for people's physical and mental well-being to have access to green spaces, and it's no good that being somewhere that they only visit 2 weeks a year when they go on holiday to the countryside. It has to be somewhere that they can visit every day, so they're getting that benefit, every single day of their life. My name is Julia Davies, and I'm here today to talk about rewilding. That's not my profession. By profession, I was a lawyer, and I was also involved in setting up a backpack business. But why I'm working on this now is because I'm in the fortunate position to be able to help wildlife trusts and other conservation groups acquire land to restore it to nature, and that's something that I'm able to do to try and address the biodiversity crisis. The commercial value of biodiversity is now being recognised. Mark Carney, the former head of the Bank of England, he's recognised it. Bankers are recognising it. Just if you look at just pollinators alone, I only found out the other day that we're importing bumblebees. Every year we're importing hundreds of thousands of bumblebees to pollinate our plants. We can't grow crops without insects, and unfortunately we've absolutely decimated the numbers of all wildlife, in particular of our insects. And we may think that we can exist with other forms of commerce, but no one can exist with any forms of commerce unless we have food, and we have to have insects for food. So we need to address the biodiversity and climate crisis. Everybody needs to change the way we live, and one of the things that we need to do is we need to change the way that we eat. As a sort of modern society, we've been eating more and more meat and dairy. I don't believe that's something as a society we've always done. It's something that has developed over time, and we know that we need to eat less meat and dairy, and we need to farm our food less intensively, because the way that we've been farming our food has it's decimated wildlife, and we don't exist outside of the natural world. We're part of the natural world, and so we cannot ignore any longer the impact that we've had through the way that we've been producing our food. And that is not the fault of the farmers. The farmers have done what they were asked to do. We had subsidies and a whole structure in place which was all about getting the most amount of food out of pretty much every bit of land. So we've been farming land that should never have been farmed. It's very low grade land, and the only way to get any food off that land is to put in loads and loads of artificial inputs. So that's pesticides, herbicides, and artificial fertilizers. And if you put into our environment a pesticide is something that kills insects. And guess what? It's not just going to kill the insects that we need to get rid of to grow those crops. It's going to kill other insects as well. The same goes for herbicides. That's going to kill the very plants which our bird life and our insect life needs to survive. And that's why our wildlife has been absolutely decimated. And not only is it doing that, it's also getting into our watercourses, and then through excessive things like nitrates, which come from the fertilizers, that's then getting into eventually into our oceans, which is causing really bad problems where I live, which is near Poole Harbour, where they've got now a massive problem of algal blooms, which then it's destroying wildlife. So I'm really excited that I've just been able to help with my first rewilding project near the village of Bear Regis in Dorset, and that's with the Dorset Wildlife Trust. So I've helped them to acquire 420 acres of land, which was really marginal farming land. It was land that really shouldn't have been farmed. It was being used to produce some meat. Approximately about 35 male dairy cows were being raised for a period of time until they could go to market. So that wasn't a high-grade meat. What was really staggering about the whole site is that the cows themselves were only grazing about 11 acres, and the rest of the site was all growing food to feed to those cows. So from a food perspective, in a sort of biodiversity and climate crisis, it doesn't make a lot of sense to be using that much land to produce that little food. But from a jobs perspective also, the 420 acres were contributing to less than one job. So since the land's been acquired by Dorset Wildlife Trust, there's already 2 people in a full-time position associated with that land. And going forward, we're going to be creating lots of employment and business opportunities for the local community, including the farming community. So going forward, although we're rewilding, we'll still have grazing animals on the site, and we're most keen to work with a local farmer who will be able to graze her cows on the site. So we'll still be producing food, and we'll still be producing business opportunities and jobs. We're also looking to convert the former farm buildings into potentially a green service station. The site is located on a real transport hub down to the West Country. And plus, what's really wonderful is the site is right next to the village of Bury, so we're really working very closely with the local community. We've already got allotments on the site, and we're going to increase the amount of community food growing. And really, one of the wonderful things is where the local community is looking to relocate their village hall onto the site, so we really will have the community right in the heart of the project. So the second post that's just been put in place at Wild Woodbury is a community engagement officer. So he's part of the local community, and he's going to be engaging with the local schools and the parish council and all of the local people there. And we've been very clear right from the start. We haven't created a defined plan for the whole site until we've consulted with the local community, so we're doing that right now. And one of the things I'm most excited about is involving the local school children. I really want them to get them out onto the site and then for them to share their ideas. So for example, the area of land closest to the village, we'll really be making that as community space. We're talking about potentially a food forest and community woodland, and we are creating a lot more space for people to be able to access. So although this site previously was right next to the village, the villagers didn't have access to most of it because most of it was private property. So we're now opening it up, and they'll be able to come and they'll create their own pathway through it. So rather than deciding where people go on the site, we're leaving it up to them to create their own desire lines, which I think is such a lovely concept.